Our Christmas parties have just become a little bit more interesting. Okay. There are going to be a small minority of people that are going to push the envelope and not realize what is the appropriate social conduct of now cannabis being legalized. So one of the things that I recommend and that you should be already doing in your Christmas parties or any kind of events is that if you are providing alcohol, you should be providing also a ride home or an alternative or a taxi. And the reason why is if your employee drinks with the alcohol that a company has provided and gets into a car accident or a vehicle accident while they leave the event under the alcohol that an organization has provided, you are liable for that accident as well. And by giving employees a choice to take a cab or their own vehicle, you have provided that option, and now it is on the employee's responsibility to do so. Some companies are going to choose to not provide cannabis at the Christmas party, which I am going to be well, there are some companies here that will, but you can prohibit cannabis use just like you can say we're not having beer or we're not having wine or anything like that. It's the same thing. Or you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes inside the building or smoke inside the company premise. It's the same thing. There's no human right that says I can now smoke anywhere, everywhere, whenever I want to. It's just like any other substance. And what I would like you to think about is you already have everything in place. It's called your drugs and alcohol policy. Your update just includes you adding alcohol, cannabis, and illicit drugs to your company policy. And congratulations, you have now just updated your policy manual. Check. Okay? So this isn't as complicated of an issue as a lot of people are concerned about. There's going to be a small minority of people that are going to make a lot of bad mistakes that is going to be very public, but it's going to be a very small minority. The majority of us are very responsible. We have family, we have friends, we have children. We're not going to make bad decisions. Unfortunately, there's a small population of people that make bad decisions, continue to make bad decisions, and blame everyone else for their bad decisions. And so all of this that we're going to be talking about is really focusing on that small minority. The majority of employees are going to be okay. The government has rolled out a plan which pretty much says that they will oversee the growers and the distribution. And once the retailers come in, they're in Alberta, it's going to be private. Some other organizations are going to be publicly owned. And it's estimated that opening up a store is going to cost around $500,000 to be able to comply with all the permits, all the training, all the health and safety regulations, and everything like that. So it's not just any Joe Blow can open up a store and be selling cannabis to you. It's going to be very strictly regulated, and the financial hurdle to get into that retail store is quite high, that the person has to be pretty responsible in order to have $500,000 in order to open up one of these retail stores. We are definitely not going to have online sales. There are some states in the US where you can just go on and click, so that's not coming out either. And in Alberta, there isn't going to be any lounges yet where you can or definitely not in Calgary, where you're going to be able to publicly consume and smoke cannabis. So it's quite interesting. It's legal, but you can't do it anywhere. So that's going to be a really tough or a quagmire to sort of overlook. You're going to be able to have 30 grams on a person. And 30 grams roughly is about 2 packs of cigarettes. Is that right? Is that?
No, I'd say it's
more. Well, really compacted.
Depending on how much you roll or what
okay. More than 2 packs of cigarettes. So that's a lot. In beer terms, you're carrying a keg. So maybe that's more accurate. The government said, we'll let the employers handle the education part and the policies and procedure because they got this figured out. They're quite competent. And most of the employers are going, what? And the problem is the high multi-million, multinational organizations got this figured out because they have to deal with drugs and alcohol on a regular basis. The small businesses are sort of left out high and dry because they don't have the resources, the manpower, especially if you're a single store owner or an owner where you have 5 or 10 employees and you are HR, you are finance, you are everything like that. This seems to, it is a mountain for you to try to figure out how to do this. But the reason why is for an HR professional, this is a no-brainer because they do this day in and day out. For somebody who has no experience, it seems like a lot, but really the way you're going to roll out your cannabis policies is exactly how you roll out any policy. Just a lot of people are freaking out because it's like, well, everyone's going to come into work high. They're not. Okay. Come October 17th, 15th, 17th. Okay. There's not going to be, well, some people might take the day off to celebrate, but the majority of people are not. One of the things that has been asked of me is, are you going to do it? And this is what I tell people. I have an iPhone 5. The last laptop I bought was 12 years ago. I have a vehicle that is from 2010. I do not buy anything new or do anything that hasn't been tested and tried, and I allow other people to make mistakes first. I learned this through my big sister, who thought that honesty was the best policy with our parents. Guess what? It wasn't. So I will eventually, at some point, I'm curious, like everyone else, the highest population of users or of new users are 50 and 60-year-olds. Because these are the individuals that have been told that this is bad. And so it shouldn't be the millennials you should be worried about. It should be Bill, right? Or Margaret, who all of a sudden seems a lot happier coming into work. So it's left to us to try to manage this issue that the government has created, but it's not that bad. Where it is a little bit scary is for organizations and industries that have a drug and alcohol problem. So companies have been dealing with drug and alcohol problems for a very long time, especially up north. And one of the things that they have found is that when they prohibit something, employees just figure out a loophole to do something else. And so one of the things that's happening up north is people are now using cocaine more because it doesn't last in the system. There aren't tests as many. So all of a sudden there's drug and alcohol policies, but you know, Donnie can go on Thursday, have a 4-day weekend, have a ripper on Thursday, and be fine for Monday. Right? And one of these things, no matter what kind of policies and procedures you're going to put in place, if people want to do it, they'll do it. And the only thing that you are responsible for is having proof that you told your employees don't do it when you're coming into work. That sounds a lot simpler than it is. One of the big issues is drinking and driving. We've yet to have publicly been shown that there's effective THC or impairment level for cannabis. We are told there are, but it's very difficult, especially when you mix drugs and cannabis together. It's like a cocktail. You know, you should only drink wine or hard liquor. And when you drink hard liquor, beer, and wine, it's a whole different drunk, right? And the same thing happens when you're mixing a whole bunch of drugs. All of a sudden, if your tolerance with beer is 6 beer and you have cannabis, your impairment might be 2 beer or 3 beer. Right? Or if you think you've taken a couple of hits and you're fine, but you've also drank alcohol, that really lowers your level of tolerance. So it's going to be interesting. In Colorado, accidents have gone up with cannabis and a mixture of alcohol, but it's yet to be known whether people are just hyper reporting the mixture, where in the past it was like testing for alcohol was a no-brainer. So therefore, this was a DUI and this was just an alcohol thing. Whereas now, because cannabis is legal and the police force is hypersensitive, they're also adding in the cannabis, but this is unknown. This will only come out, in future reports and that sort of thing. Public consumption is a no-no. You can only grow 4 plants in Alberta for yourself. There's no height requirement. There used to be like a 1 meter requirement, but you can go however you want. Now, everyone's going to be growing cannabis at home. Well, guess what? You can make your own beer. You can have your own garden. Do you have your own garden and make your own beer? No, you go to the store. It's much easier. It's really hard to grow cannabis. It's very difficult. And so all of this, like, there's going to be, everyone's going to be, nope. People are going to be going to the store because people are lazy. Now, the funny thing is, in the real estate business, realtors are going to be asking you, has cannabis been grown at this home? And you, as a consumer, will now go, Miss or Mr. Realtor, I would like a home, but of a home that cannabis hasn't been grown. And now, if you lie that you haven't grown cannabis, and there's all of a sudden mold or evidence after the fact that you have grown cannabis in the home, you're liable for all the cleanup because you lied in bad faith that cannabis wasn't grown in the home. So there's all these unforeseen circumstances that this will only come out once things, you can plan all you want, you can create all the policies, you can do all the education, but all these unforeseen circumstances are only going to come out months or years after the fact. The burden of proof is on you as the employer, whether you have educated your employees. We had an incident where an employee hit another employee. We terminated them. Employment standards said we shouldn't have. We were too harsh. The employee was of good standings and a long-term employee, and just because they hit somebody, you shouldn't be able to fire them. And so we said, hold on. So what you're telling me is if I'm a good employee, I get 1 shot at anyone in the company? That's what you're telling me. Because that's what I'm hearing. No, that's not what we're saying. I'm pretty sure that's what you're saying. We appealed it and we won. Okay? However, we won because we had a workplace violence and harassment policy that says you can't hit people. We had a training video that said you can't hit people, which provided the training. We had a quiz that says, can you hit people? And the answer was no. Right? And so when we provided, and we had video of the actual assault, right? So we had a slam dunk. It was one of these things that the government, it seems over the last, and the government sponsors my talk, so the government's great, by the way, like, keep on the great work. But it seems the government is making it harder and harder to terminate employees, and the onus of proof is much more on the employer to say, did you do all the things necessary to let your employee know that this is wrong? And the answer of, it should be common sense that you can't come into work drunk or high, apparently is not a legal defense. So one of the first things that you're going to do after this is you're just going to add cannabis to all your policies where you have alcohol. This is very easy. Open your employee manual, go Control F to find all, type in alcohol. You will see everywhere where alcohol is stated in your policy manual, and you're going to then go replace alcohol with alcohol and cannabis. Congratulations, you are done. Okay, I just saved you 3 hours of editing. What is sometimes recommended is that you add prescriptions. And one of the things that you now want to do is put an impairment policy in place that says if you are taking any kind of prescription or over-the-counter, that the employee must disclose that they're coming into work impaired. Okay? So this is a combination of fit for duty and employee impairment policy. And the idea here is you have a policy that says you are fit for duty, so you are able to do your duties as you are. And if you're not, you then must tell your employer, hey, I'm impaired. And this is one of the things that I recommend from you for this on. You refer to marijuana, bud, or whatever as cannabis, because that is the, I don't talk, when I talk about alcohol, I say alcohol. I don't talk about stogies and Mickeys and that sort of thing. So marijuana, bud, it's all slang. So as professionals, let's use the word as it's intended. And two, you start using the word impairment. And the idea about impairment is you're making a judgment on, I think you're high. I think you're drunk. Whereas, like, I'm concerned, I think you're impaired. This could be you stayed up all night because your baby was screaming and yelling and puking all over you and you haven't had a good night's sleep. Instead of taking Dayquil, you took NyQuil. Whoops. Right? And all of a sudden you're a little drowsy or whatever it may be. If you have some kind of medical situation where you have low blood pressure, you might be flirting and that sort of thing. And it's, I think you're high. Or you're a little bit impaired. Is everything okay? So using the word impairment provides a lot less judgment on the start of the conversation than going, it's like, are you high? Because you look high. Duty to accommodate is something that you have to have anyways. So if you don't have a policy, regardless, you are required to accommodate employees' disabilities, physical and mental, and prescriptions and that sort of thing. So regardless whether you have it or not, you got to do it. You need to investigate. So you don't have to have a policy about how you're going to investigate, but you have to have a proof that something occurred, you looked into it, you asked a whole bunch of questions, you sat down, you made a rational decision, and then you terminated an employee rather than something happened and you said, get out. Right? And when employers lose cases, the majority of the time it's because they didn't investigate. And investigation seems like such a complicated process. Investigation means talking to people. So you're going to talk to the person that is at work. You're going to talk to the supervisor. You're going to talk to HR. And after you've talked to a number of people and you think you have the story straight and you have all your questions answered and you can tell the narrative better than all the people put together, what happened? Congratulations, you've just done an investigation. Now you just have to write it down. And the easiest thing to do in an investigation is have people do all the work for you. So when you meet somebody or when you're talking to somebody, you ask them, here's a piece of paper. Can you write down your statement of what happened? Can you write down the statement of what happened? Can you write down your statement of what happened? Give it back to me at the end of the day. You now have proof that you conducted an investigation. If you don't want to take notes, guess what? You have a smartphone. Whip out the smartphone, hit voice memo, and ask the employee, can I record this conversation? You can have a copy of it. Why not? It's their voice. And if they go yes, you start recording, and then you say, hi, my name is Czarnecki. I'm here with Bill Smith. Bill, can you say your name for the record and that I have your permission to record this conversation? I'm Bill Smith, and you have permission to record the conversation. And you continue on, and you don't have to take notes. You can just have a normal conversation, and then you have a record of that conversation, and you can give it to Bill. And the nice thing is, because you know you're being recorded yourself, you're a lot nicer, and you're a lot more professional than you would be otherwise. So it's a good check and balance. This is the number one way employers get in trouble and lose cases, because they either didn't try to accommodate. So I'm on these prescriptions on medical cannabis, and I'm going to only be on medical cannabis for 6 months, and I need to have a sedentary job until this back pain or whatever goes away. Nope, get out. They get in trouble. Now, if they have an investigation, see, can this person do anything else? And sorry, we don't have anything for you. You've been with us for 2 years. Here's 2 weeks severance. Thank you very much. We apologize. We can't accommodate you. Here's all the other options we have tried. You're going to be okay. Or you try the accommodated duties and the person's failing miserably and they can't do anything else. You at least tried. What the government wants to see that you tried. And one of the things that I recommend to you is if anything ever occurs with your employees, Instead of seeing your employee, see your grandmother, grandfather, sister, mother, brother, somebody you care about. How would you treat them? And if you would treat them, get out, you're a terrible human being. If your son or daughter came to you and said, Mom, Dad, I have an addiction, I need help, would you go, get out of my house? Or would you help them? You'd help them. And that's what the government expects of you, that at least you try to help them. And if they refuse the help or don't want to participate, then you can kick them out. But if you don't at least try, that's where companies get in trouble. Companies always get in trouble for not investigating. And investigation means talking to people. Hi, I need this accommodation. Let me think about it. No. You have to have proof that you had a conversation with managers, supervisors, the doctor, the employee, looked at alternatives, provided the alternative. And guess what? If you provide an accommodation and that person doesn't agree to it, that's fine. You can then fire them because you just have to accommodate. You don't have to accommodate everything that they want. Well, I only want to work on Wednesdays from 2 to 8. And then I want to have the rest of the week off? No. What are your requirements? What can and can't you do? I know you want this sedentary job, but we can have you sweeping the yard. I don't want to be outside. I want to be inside where it's nice and warm. Well, we can accommodate you with you pushing the broom while you're impaired. I don't want that. Well, we don't have anything for you. So that's the other kind of myth, that just because an employee says, I want these kinds of accommodations, you, in the spirit of them, you just have to meet them of what you're trying to accommodate, not the specific things that they're wanting to accommodate. And then termination. This is where employers get in trouble, that if you say, before we terminate, we will investigate and provide accommodations, and you don't, and you are completely right. So one of the things that saved our case with the workplace violence is that we would say that we would investigate, and we did. Now, if we terminated the employee without an investigation, they could have had us with a, aha, you didn't investigate first. So regardless whether the employee was right or wrong, you still didn't follow your own policies. And so policies are a double-edged sword. They're a really good guideline, but if they're too strict, if they're too totalitarian, that doesn't give you a lot of room for interpretation or wiggle room, you must follow them, because the first thing the government or the lawyers are going to ask is, show me your policies. And then if you didn't go over and beyond your policies, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, if you don't have a policy, but you did everything right, you're going to be okay. Right? But where a lot of people don't understand, so if I had none of this, right, I had zero policies, I had zero documentation, but I can prove that I told the employee that you can't hit people. I can prove that we did an investigation, we looked at the alternatives, and we fired them and provided a severance, and I have no policies, I'm still going to be okay because I did everything correctly and I gave a chance to the employee. So here is your crash course plan of introducing cannabis into your organization. Now, this is being recorded. And so if you miss anything or anything like that, don't worry about it. I'm going to put this recording as well onto that link once I get it updated and things like that. So don't feel like you're missing out on anything. And this is my backup plan. Just give me one sec here. One time I recorded a 3-hour lecture without turning on the mic. And so now I always record 2 audios just in case. We already talked about updating the relevant policies. You should have, if you don't, an employment contract before an employee starts. This is your sort of number one best bet. It looks professional. It looks like you have your stuff together. It allows the employee to make a decision whether they want to work for your company or not, and knowing, hey, cannabis is not allowed. You need to you need to let us know if you're impaired. What we do is we send out our entire employee manual and say, here's our entire our employee manual. Take a look at it. Ask us if you have any questions. Sign off that you reviewed the manual. And that allows and provides an opportunity that the employee knew fully well coming into the organizations what the expectations were. Those of you who might want to just write down that Google address again. Use the Alberta videos. They provided them. They should be good enough, right? So that if you, all you have to do is just go onto YouTube, type in Alberta government cannabis, and you'll see these 2 videos. You can show them to your employee. And if the question is asked, did you train your employees? You can go, yeah, with your videos. I'm sorry, is that not good enough? Because if it's not, we have a problem. Because you're providing educational material that you don't think is valid. I can't wait for that conversation. And then documented proof that you have done all of these things. So the question always becomes, do I need to have the original paper with a blue signature and date and initials on every single document? And think about evidence as a spectrum. On one end, you have the original piece of paper with blue ink, everything's initials signed, blood oath, and everything like that, to where you have nothing. A couple of years ago, electronic stamps or proof that somebody did something electronically wasn't seen as very strong evidence, and that is really moving now towards solid evidence. There was a recent case where somebody lost because of an emoji. You would have been laughing at that 5 years ago, but somebody sent a text saying, are we good to go? And the person answered with a thumbs up. And then they proceeded to go with X. And then the person who texted the thumbs up said, I didn't mean that's good to go. I meant that, yeah, let me think about it. And they lost in court because this fundamentally means, yeah, I'm giving you the thumbs up. So what would have been laughable 5 years ago is now being seen as proof and evidence in the digital age. And one day, maybe the government will stop asking us to fax things in and just let us email. So here's the real world example of what I did in my organization. And hopefully what you'll see is this isn't that bad. So for the last 2 years, all we have done is we have added prescription, so we have a 9-page agreement, and the 9-page agreement is on the critical policies that we want people to really know about or be aware of. So we provide, pay, benefits, dress code, but we also put in prescription drugs and over-the-counter medication, alcohol, disclosure of employment, modified duties. Now, these are the short versions of our 1-page or 2-page policies, but this is enough to prove that, yeah, they were aware. Who has ever memorized a policy? No one. But the employee, before even starting, is aware that these are the expectations. So just by doing it ahead of time, and I've been doing this since pretty much 2016, so for 2 years, every single employee that's been coming in has been given the updated policies even before cannabis came into being. So that's a really quick thing that you can do. Next, I just put it on the company intranet. I believe my exact words are, the Alberta government requires employers to educate that it is a bad idea to come into work impaired. Okay, so as you can see, I can be a little cheeky. And employees, so every single person in our organization, when they boot up their browser, they get this message. And they're going to get this message for about 3 or 4 months. And so, were you not aware? No, had no idea. Well, guess what? Every single time you booted up your computer and opened up the browser, that message was there. Next. You can choose whatever way to orientate your employees. Of course, face-to-face interaction is way better than video. Okay, but there's a hybrid approach. So what we do is we sit our employees down and we have them watch videos and quizzes and everything like that. And then we also sit them down for about a 30-minute conversation. And then we walk them through pretty much exactly like the job offer, except now it's called the employment contract. And everything that we did with the employment offer, we just do it again. So we do it twice. And so what we do is we provide a health and safety video with our major health safety policies. We have them do a quiz. Now the quiz is very simple, such as, I'm just trying to think of a quick question. When you hear the fire alarm, where should you go? And, options, mustard point, home, and that sort of thing, right? So the questions are there really not to trick one, but the questions are there for the adult to just remember, if they weren't watching the video, that the questions is simple enough to go, okay, so they're learning it twice, once on the video and once on the test. Right? So you use the quizzes and the exams as another learning mechanism, and then you can prove to the government that, hey, they scored 100%. One of the questions was, can I smoke at work? Or can I smoke before coming into work? And they answered no. Obviously, they understood the policy. So this is a really quick way to be able to do it. I use ProProfs. It's about $1,300 a year, but we have 200 employees. I understand that might be prohibitive on some individuals, but one day in court will pay for this for about 10 years. Right? So it's one of those things that serve a balancing act of it. So we have a young workers video that pretty much says ask questions. We have a WCB violence video that we use. And again, WCB provided this. If it's good enough for WCB, it should be good enough for us. Workplace harassment quiz. Can you hit people? No. Workplace violence and conflict. Material handling. This is 70% of our injuries were back related. We started showing a video on orientations on protecting your back and proper lifting techniques. We now have about 1 or 2 cases a year, where before I started and implemented this, we had 37 in a year of just back injuries and things people straining. So just putting that information up front and making people aware really does reduce. And then we have the cannabis video, and we have a little thing saying, yep, it's legal, but just like a drug, you can't come into work. This takes about 3 hours for them to go through all the videos and things like that, and they do it in about the first week. The 3 hours also includes doing WMIS 2015, which you are legally required to do with every single new employee. They're non-transferable. And we get an email stating how well that employee did on the exams. And I highly recommend that you don't do an 80 out of 100, that you do 100 out of 100 on every single exam. Would you want to go to a doctor that did 80% well in medical school? Right? So what you want to do is, they scored 100 and 100. So you can have them take multiple tests, right? Or try multiple times. But what you care about is they got every single answer correct. So it should be good. For current employees, we put it on our HRIS, and we had them read the policies and check off on them. So I understand that some of you might not have the $50,000 or $100,000 to have an HRS, or you have a small business. So I'm going to show you a much easier way to do it. But for current employees, all we did, instead of running around to 200 people and say, sign this document, we put it online, they read it, they click, and we have a date stamp stating that on this day, this person read this document. And the only way they could read this document is by using their username and password to go into it, read the document. They have to put some kind of comment. So it's a forced comment. So most people put like NA, okay, whatever, but they have to do something and then hit submit. No money, no problem. I got you covered. Okay. Google Drive. How many of you have Gmail? How many of you knew you had Google Drive? Oh, that's not bad. It's getting better. But Google Drive is a very powerful online tool. It's pretty much like Microsoft Office, but in the cloud and for free. And they have this great thing called surveys. Now, a lot of people think about surveys as, let me know your opinion. But guess what? You can use surveys as exams. And even Google Drive, there's a check mark that says, do you want this to be an exam, or do you want this to be a quiz, or do you want this to be a survey? And if you say, I want this to be a quiz, you can actually say which answers are correct. And then all they have to do is like answer, and then they automatically get a response, and you get an email saying so-and-so completed this quiz, and this is their score. And now you have a digital record. So what we did was, and this is what I teach in my universities for people that need to roll out policies to large number of people or spread out a number of people. So you go into Google Drive, you create a survey with one question, and that one question is your entire policy. So that's the entire policy. They have to read the entire policy, enter the name, provide feedback, click. This is a multiple choice answer with one answer. Click that I have read it. This is what they see. They hit submit, and now you have a digital record right here of when they read it, who it was, they understood, and they had no comments for free. Okay? You can get Google Business. I think it's about $10 a month. Highly recommend it. You can have your own URL and things like that, but it gives you a little bit of a security method, especially for privacy and hacks and breaches and things like that. It's just a little bit higher, but there you go. You just do this, put in all your policies, send it out to all your employees. Guess what? You can send it out on their smartphone. They just take a look at it, read it, hit submit, done. They don't even have to be on a company computer. And you can roll this out within 2 or 3 days. Oops, where are we here? So, my proof. During the orientation and during the employment offer, I have dates, initials, and signatures that they are aware of these policies. I have multiple channels of information. I have quizzes, videos, and documents. I have digital date stamps of employees being aware of this. I'm addressing with various learning styles. Some people will view it as a video. Some people will be better at reading. Some people will better be face-to-face. I've got it all covered. And I have an in-person confirmation, a 30-minute sit-down of, do you have any questions? Here are the true critical policies that we have to go with, and we're done. I think I'm pretty much covered, right? You'd be comfortable with that. Adam, that's great, but I can't get anyone to sign off on anything. I'm always chasing them down. I can't figure out what's going on. I've asked them to do this 3 weeks ago, and they still haven't signed off on it. I got you covered. It's called blackmail. So what you do, especially if you're in HR and you have some control, you refuse to process anything until the policies are signed off. So if somebody gets a raise, you go, oh, I'm sorry, I can't get Bill a raise. He hasn't signed off on the new cannabis policies. So as soon as he signs off on the cannabis policies, I'll be glad to do that for you. You know how quickly you'll get that signature? So anytime there's any kind of change, especially in pay or any kind of request, now the only thing you can't do is hold off on people's pay, okay, because that's illegal. But there's nothing illegal about delay. And there's nothing illegal about not processing somebody's request until they sign off the policies. So you do have a lot of motivation behind you. And just ensure that before you process anything for an employee moving forward, you just ensure that everything is sort of up to date. The laws are changing where the government understands there's really two worlds. There's people who are in high sensitive positions and low sensitive positions. A crane operator coming into work impaired can kill, maim, and damage a lot of things. A web designer coming in and messing up on a computer, maybe financially they can hurt you a little bit, but they're not going to cause mass casualties by being a little bit impaired. And what the government has made absolutely clear is you can be tougher on sensitive positions, but you have to be lenient and proportional on the non-sensitive position. So the crane operator coming in, high as a kite, smelling of alcohol, following all these procedures, you terminating them on the spot because they refused to tell you that they were impaired and breached the policy, and you have a policy that says you must tell us if you are impaired, you're not terminating from drug use. You're terminating them from breaching the policy of impairment. That being said, your receptionist had a great night the other night, comes in and is still impaired. The government said, okay, suspend her, write him up, but you should give them another chance because the probability of them causing harm to everyone else is quite smaller proportionally to the sensitive position. The other thing that's recommended is that you put in your employment contract whether a person's position is safety or safe sensitive or not. Okay, and that automatically, now your next question is there a list that the government has provided which positions are safe sensitive and which are not? And the answer is no, because it's the employer's responsibility to use common judgment and say what is safe sensitive and what is not. You are the best judge of that. But what the government said was everyone in your organization can't be safe sensitive unless you can truly prove that. But throwing that in and also stating we have this policy as well, stating that you are in a safe sensitive role and that if something occurs, you will be treated much more severely because you can really hurt yourself and others in that if you come into work impaired. The next thing that comes into mind when cannabis enters your organization is that you first have to figure out if it's medical or not. Because if it's medical, they are protected under the physical and mental disability and human rights. So this is where you have to do an investigation. So if you find out that somebody is using cannabis, your first question is it medical? And if the answer is no, perfect. Somebody just brought in a can of beer into the workplace, whether they drank it or not, doesn't matter. They're violating the policy. You can write them up. Now, can you fire them for it? Most likely not, especially if they just brought it into the workplace. You should give them another chance. But you can definitely discipline them. Now, accommodations, you can still discipline them for breaching the policy that they brought in drugs and didn't tell anyone, even though it's prescription and they violated the policy. But you shouldn't fire them over it, especially if nothing occurred. And so now you have a requirement or a duty to accommodate. The next question is, if it's not medical, is there a dependency? Because if there is, well, guess what? Your son or daughter just told you that they were a drug addict. Are you going to kick them out? No, you're going to give them a shot. And so you're like, okay, thank you. Let's get you some help. Let's put you into counseling or give you drug rehab. Now, if they refuse to go or lied that they're going to the appointments, no problem. You did your due diligence. But when you don't even try, that is where you get in trouble. So safe sensitive positions also give you a lot more intrusion, I may want to use, into the situation because there's more at stake. So with safe sensitive positions, you can ask a little bit more questions can we meet with your doctor? Are there alternatives? Do you have to take cannabis? Can you take something that doesn't cause impairment? So it's not one of these things that, oh, I have a doctor's note, I guess I can't do anything. You can push back. And you can push back a lot as long as they don't have to tell you what they're taking it for, right? Or what the prescription is. But you can have a conversation. Can you please bring me a note that this is the only drug that you can use? And the rest you can read yourself. So that's really all I want to talk on that part, that you do have a lot of choice when somebody comes in and says, I have a dependency or I'm taking these drugs or I'm being impaired. You're not tied. And the idea here is just have a conversation. Have a conversation with the employee. Try to have a conversation with the doctor, fat chance, but at least have a conversation with the doctor through the employee. And if it's a doctor and it's truly a medical situation, the doctor will participate. But usually what ends up happening, what I have found is there are two types of employees. There's one type of employee that says, I have a broken hand, I'll see you in 2 months because I can't do anything. And I have another type of employee that says, I have a broken hand, I still have a good left hand, what can I do to come into work? Those employees, you will never have a problem with getting information, talking about alternatives, finding solutions. It's that 5% that, hey, I have a doctor's note, hands off, you can't talk to me, I'll see you in 2 months. Not so fast. We require additional information. We need a conversation. Please come in. Let's look at alternatives. Let's bring you in for modified duties. Guess what? When people come in for modified duties, they recover faster. It's a miracle. All right. I'm not going to talk much about duty accommodation because the government has provided a bunch of videos and a bunch of documents and things like that, even examples of policies. So you can just take a look at that. You have some right without intrusion of asking what's going on with that employee. So how long will they be on this drug? Are they attending appointments? Are there any absences? Are they fit to perform duties? So you can have medical cannabis, and if the THC level is low enough, there's zero impairment. But you don't know that. You're just assuming they're taking cannabis, they must be high. And after this, hopefully, you'll see that that's not the case. So knowing the levels of THC in that, a person can be coming in with cannabis and medical cannabis and not be impaired. Anyone use a lawyer recently? You don't have to share. Okay. Okay. What your lawyer did was when you asked the question and they said, I'll come back to you. They went to their assistant that they paid $20 an hour and said, go to this website, type in this person's question and find me 5 case laws where this was addressed. And then they reviewed those 5 case laws, or the assistant summarized those 5 case laws and said, this is what you have to do. And then they took that when they paid the assistant, let's say $40 to do that in 2 hours, and they charge you $400 to have that conversation, and you go, wow, you're really smart. No, they just have this website, which is free for everyone. Okay. So go on there, click on Alberta, click on cannabis, marijuana, read a whole bunch of things, and you will be just as fluent in case law and what's going on as most lawyers are when they're asked the first question on something that they haven't researched in a very long time. What we have learned from case law is the following. As I now stall until the case laws come up. Zero tolerance policies can be enforced. However, it has to be very specific, and you need to show that there's an issue in your industry for it. You can terminate somebody for breaching a policy, but again, you have to be very clear about the policy breaches. And you can terminate somebody when the employee understands that if they disclose, they can get help, they can get rehab, and they refuse to disclose. You will always fail if you don't investigate. You should accommodate the disability, not the prescription. So it doesn't matter what they're taking. How is it them affecting? The laws, the judges understand that you have to be harsher with people in safe, sensitive positions, and that the discipline must be proportional. Again, you can't treat the web designer the same as the crane operator. And if you can prove your industry has a drug and alcohol problem, random drug testing policy can be upheld. But if you're doing one and going, I just want to find out who's drinking and doing cannabis, it's not going to hold. You have to prove that there's an issue in your industry or within your organization to do so. And I can't tell you enough that employers always get in trouble because for whatever reason, they stop talking to their employees. As soon as an employee provides a problem or an issue, they stop talking to them and they just terminate them. If there's an issue that you have with your employee, whether it be drugs or alcohol, cannabis coming into the workplace, sit down with them. Have a conversation with them, just like you would with your child. Does your child listen to you all the time? When you tell your child something once, do they do it? So why are you expecting that of your employees? They're somebody else's children. It's exactly the same thing. The other thing comes tolerance. So somebody who's never done it or does it rarely is going to have a completely different experience than somebody who's a habitual user. Same thing with alcohol. You can have a functional drunk who can drink a bottle of vodka before coming to work and you have no idea. And then you can have somebody who has like 2 shots and they're dancing on the table and stripping. Right? And they're saying it's the alcohol, sure. Little did they know it was soda water. So we're just going to do a quick crash course here on cannabis. So they did a survey recently last year and said that 55% of Albertans have tried cannabis over the course of their lifetime at some point, and 20% have tried it in the last year. And I'm pretty sure continue to try it every once in a while, right? So about 20% of the Canadian population is doing this on a regular basis anyways. And 7%, you old timers, are going to try it once it becomes legal because now it's okay. And when you go on YouTube, you see these in Colorado, grandmothers smoking for the first time. It's hilarious. There's 4 of them. So, of course, they're going to vary. And just like drinking, we're going to have a whole bunch of BC people and Saskatchewan people on their 18th birthday trying cannabis for the first time. And I think this, more than anything, is going to cause the accidents where, well, that's just anecdotal. So here's the sort of crash course on cannabis. The reason why cannabis is such a miracle drug to us, and people use it for medical purposes, is we have cannabinoids in our systems naturally and receptors that help our body and mind and really are like steroids for our immune system, our neurological system, our cognitive system. And so there's 2 types. Well, there isn't just 2 types. There's 2 main types. There's the sativa and the indica, and there's a whole bunch of other hybrids, and it's pretty much chemistry. If you combine, mix, and match, it's pretty much like dog breeding, right? If you put a whole bunch of dogs together and you do it right, you can create something beautiful or a chihuahua. So I apologize if anyone has a chihuahua, beautiful dogs. So the sativa is a little bit more for daytime use, and artists use this to get creative, stimulated, and things like that. The indica is a little bit more of a deep relaxation. It's a sleep aid. So if you ever taken cannabis, tried cannabis, and you got sleepy, chances are you were taking indica. This is a cannabis plant. You can take this right now and smoke it, and it will just smell and be terrible and nothing will happen to you. You can blend it up in a mixer, and you will have a great poop because there's lots of fiber, okay, and lots of vitamins and everything like that. But you're not going to get anything from it, from an impairment high. What you have to do is you have to wait for these trichomes to start growing and get the cannabis plant fuzzy. And when you, like if you Google cannabis, and you'll see some very green and some fuzzy plants. The fuzziness, these trichomes are these chemical factories that are creating these, the THC and that psychoactive elements in it. And so what occurs is once you grow cannabis and you cultivate it properly, this is what makes it really hard. Just like fruits can be just like fruit can be over-ripened and it's not very good, like bananas, or they can be green and it's not very good. The same thing happens with cannabis. It's really hard to grow good cannabis. Now, the other thing that occurs is you can take a seed from Ontario or BC and plant it in Alberta. And because of altitude, humidity, sunshine, there's a whole bunch of different factors that you're like, oh, that was great. And then you come to Alberta and you grow your own and it's not the same. Chemical composition, what's in the soil, it all varies very differently. So it's not that easy to grow cannabis, but THC medically has been proven to be able to help with pain relief, and a lot of people are moving away from opioids to cannabis to help with pain relief. And it really has been proven to help and aid in pain relief. THC is that psychoactive element that provides impairment. Now, there's another one, CBD, which is more of the medical component of it that really does, again, help with a lot of medical issues. Let's just leave it at that. The cannabis that your grandparents smoked is not the same cannabis that is on the street right now. Over the course of the last 4 or 5 decades, the street cannabis has been specifically bred, just like the Chihuahua or the Pit Bull or the Great Dane, to have high concentration of THC. However, you can breed out THC to a certain level. You can't get rid of it, just like you can't turn a dog into a cat. It still is going to be that. But anecdotally, medical cannabis patients have said, there's no like scientific paper or on this, but I reached out to a cannabis factory, and they said, you know, don't quote us on this, but our patients have told us if they take medical cannabis with less than 1% THC, they don't feel anything. They don't feel any impairment. And so this is why it's very important to know the dosage of the THC that your employees might be taking as a medical component. Of course, it's going to, it treats and has been proven to treatment. So it's not a miracle drug. It's not that's going to cure cancer, but it's a definite option. And the problem has been, because it has been prohibited for so long, it was very difficult to do scientific studies on it and to do actual clinical trials. So we've lost 100 years, 100 years of medical scientific studies on this plant. Where were we in 1920, medically speaking, to where we are now? So the nice thing is we're going to catch up much quicker, but we lost over 100 years of the opportunity to study this plant. The medical costs are astronomical right now for medical cannabis because it's so hard to cultivate and grow, and hopefully with mass production and more people doing it will reduce the costs, but it's around, depending on what you're taking it for, it can be anywhere from $1,500 to $10,000 to $20,000, especially in pill form. Pill form is much more expensive. And so some companies that are providing cannabis are doing it at a cap. So after 6,000 or 1,500, they're just doing a cap and no more. So how much time do I have left? 20 minutes with Q&A or 20 minutes in total? Okay. There's various ways that you will be able to consume cannabis. Smoking, edibles, oils, and everything like that. There's even suppositories. You're going to be able to pass a breath test with that one, by the way. So when I was doing my research, I asked, with medical cannabis, what do you think the most common form of taking medical cannabis is? %80 of medical cannabis from this specific company that produces medical cannabis, 80% of their patients use it in smoking form. Now, the reason why is it's much more immediate effect than taking it, and it's cheaper. pills are very expensive. Oils are very expensive because they're in concentrated forms. And so, and I thought to myself, you know, when this becomes public, I bet everyone's just going to be taking pills and oils and stuff because it's going to be taboo. But if it's taboo already and the medical community is smoking it, or the medical patients are smoking it, chances are the public is going to be smoking it as well. I just thought that was a little bit interesting. The reason why the majority of people smoke it is that the onsets are almost immediate and the duration is much smaller, about 3 to 4 hours, because it goes straight to your lungs, and from your lungs it goes into your blood, and from your blood it goes all over your body. It's a quick, fast delivery system. All the other methods are going through some kind of digestive or organ thing, so it needs to be processed more. So the onset is much larger. So it's like, hey guys, do you want to have some fun? Take this and wait an hour and a half, right? Or, hey, do you want to get high in 15 minutes? And this is why I think smoking is going to be a much more prevalent, even the smell. Maybe they'll do something about the smell. But because it's going through your entire system and through your digestive tracts and everything like that and through your skin, the onset is much greater and the impairment is much greater. When I was preparing this, my mother-in-law is a dentist, and she told me a story where not her, God forbid, but her colleagues went to Amsterdam for a conference, and they never tried cannabis, and she only heard this story, by the way. And so they each decided to try it because it was legal. They weren't for scientific reasons. And so they brought over a brownie and they cut it into 4 pieces, and they all took one and waited. One of them felt nothing. One of them had the best night of their life. One of them was curled up in the corner and just rocking back and forth. And one of them went like, yeah, okay, that was kind of neat, but all right. They all took it from the same source. They all took equivalent amounts. They all had different experiences. And the reason why is because its biochemistry is very similar to ours with the receptors. And so just like the prescriptions that you take right now act differently on everyone else. Your aspirin experience, your Tylenol, your NyQuil, your Gravel. With Gravel, there's 1% chance that if you give Gravel to your children, they become hyperactive and will never sleep. Guess which one mine is when we figured out using Gravel on the airplane when they were 3. Okay. So it's really highly in tune with your own chemistry, and you might try something and have the worst experience ever, and you might try something else and go, huh, and you might try something else and go, I get it, why people are doing this. Right? And this is why I'm not going to be anyone's guinea pig and let everyone do their thing, and I will just take in the reviews. Testing is going to be tough. And again, when there's that mixture of what's going on, like with alcohol and cannabis and everything like that, the impairment is much lowered. And so I'm not going to give you up the statistics because A, you're never going to do a test that you're going to need that number or anything like that, and you can Google it. But the problem is we still don't have a reliable way of testing somebody's impairment. Now, the NFL has an application that they test for concussions, and they bring out a person with an iPad or a tablet, and they make them do a series of tests to see whether they have some cognitive impairment. And so other companies are trying to bring this in and giving people these tests to see whether they have impairment or not. The problem with that is you have to have a baseline. And guess what? Some people did better high. So like it's one of these things that it's just really going to be difficult to test for impairment. And it's just our due diligence. And one of the things that's also recommended is that supervisors take impairment training. You know, and impairment training is, we all are natural at it. Somebody has glazy eyes, somebody's mumbling, not looking at you, stammering, being clumsy and that sort of thing. But it gives you a much sort of It gives you that due diligence on your employer side saying, yeah, we sent our supervisors or managers on impairment training. Of course, there's long-term and short-term effects of cannabis. Both of them cause psychosis. And what psychosis is you see and hear things that aren't there. Now, of course, there's the positive of cannabis can help with post-traumatic stress, but it can make other mental illnesses worse. And so it's a tool. It's neither good or bad. Alcohol can kill bacteria or make you drunk or kill people. It's a tool. And it's up to us to realize how responsibly we are going to use that tool. Anecdotally, for addiction, out of the core popular drugs, it is one of the least addictive drugs. However, when it's introduced to youth, addiction doubles. That being said, most people have been introduced to alcohol as youth as well. And so for me, it's an equivalency. And a lot of people are going, don't give it to your youth. Well, your youth are drinking already. But it has been shown that it does affect the developing brain. And what I was in a conference once, and what the doctor said is this: if you're not an adult over the age of 26, I would highly recommend that you postpone trying cannabis for as long as you can. And that was just, so he didn't say don't do it, but he's like, if you're going to do it, just try to postpone it for as long as you can. Now, again, all of this is, you're not going to get brain damage from your first hit, right? This is like continuous, but guess what? If you have an alcohol problem as a teenager, you're doing the same kinds of damage to your brain and your body as you would with any other drug. Everyone is worried about two things: impaired driving and the youth. Okay, so we've covered impaired driving, and that there's going to be a spike, but it's a spike of irresponsible people or people that don't know any better or think that, hey, this is just like a cigarette, and it's not. And so this is why the government is requesting employers and companies to start educating people about being responsible. And it's been shown that addiction isn't just a chemical dependency. Most people become addicted because they're lonely. They're not engaged with their community. In the Vietnam War, it was hell to be a soldier. And so what ended up happening is, and the funny thing is, they started using cannabis, and the government figured it out, and they started giving them morphine because they thought it was less addictive and less harmful. So about 20% of the soldiers were morphine addicts in the Vietnam War. And the government was concerned, and this is the US government, not the Canadian government, was concerned that when the war was over, they are bringing in a population of drug addicts back into society. What are we going to do? And guess what? The majority of them just stopped cold turkey. They had family. They got jobs. They had spouses, children. But for those individuals that had no one, that were isolated, that had some additional mental illnesses, they continued to use. So it's not just about chemical dependency. It's about the social support that is provided by the family, the community, the government, and the society. The worst thing that you can ever do to your employee who's an addict is fire them. You've just given them a death sentence. Because if you don't try to help them, no one else will. No one's going to hire an addict. They're not even going to apply. And so out of morality and ethics, we should at least try. Give them an opportunity. Because if you don't, no one else will, because they are an addict, because they don't have the social support, the family structure, the assistance, the resources to get help themselves. Thank you.